Hey, g'day guys, it's Calvin from the Cartoon Company. I do a heap of 1UZ wiring, and here is an example of one of the looms I've done. We're going to fit it up onto the engine today and test it before it goes back home to Australia. And this is like a universal type wiring loom that I do. So it's designed to fit a lot of vehicles. Being it's for the Australian market, I made sure I put air conditioning in it. I almost forgot, but I was able to slip that back in. So instead of showing my face and chatting about it, I'm going to show an engine and put it on while I talk about the loom. And this video is also going to serve as a set of instructions for the customer to fit it up. And if you're considering one of my looms, you'll get a bit of an understanding of what's being done on the loom and how to work with it. I do have options where if I get sent the engine loom out of the vehicle that's getting converted and the 1UZ loom, I can integrate them. In this case I didn't. So it's going to be quite a universal type loom, but it's going to come up pretty good, I reckon. It's going to slip together quite nicely. So let's get into it. Fit it up, make this engine run, check it's all good. Right. So if any of you have watched any of my videos before, you'll be familiar with Old Yeller here. Old Yeller is in fact a Gen 1 engine, and the loom that I'm presently fitting happens to be a Gen 2 engine, Gen 2 loom. So some of the things will be slightly different. And you will have people who actually tell you that you can't run a Gen 2 engine on a Gen 1 loom or a Gen 1 loom on a Gen 2 engine and blah blah. Well, I'm not actually going to answer that. I'm just going to get in and do it. Plug it all together. This one, because it is slightly different, like it won't bolt on nicely to the fuel rails and such. But my purpose here is just to make it run. Check everything is good, check there's no faults. Make sure we put the earths on. And you'll see here I've added an extra earth at the back. So it's in the same position as the main earth. That just goes through for my relays and fuses. I'm going to need you to get me some oxygen sensors too, please, Mike. Oh, yeah. I didn't lift the coil off. Well, I didn't need to with the last loom that came off this, but this one it's much easier if I just lift the coil off. So at the front of the engine we have the EFI temp sensor. So all these plugs have been replaced on this loom. And the EFI temp sensor, I do recommend replacing them when you give it a bit of a tidy up. And this being a Gen 2 has a different temp sensor to the Gen 1. Sorry, different temp sensor for the gauge. The EFI temp sensor interchange fine. And this isn't going to work because I don't have a cam sensor in here. I don't have a right hand cam sensor. Oh well, we'll put a cam sensor in, eh?
Is that one there alright? Because that one there's cut on an angle.
Yep, sure. As long as my wiring reaches that. The igniters must be grounded through the body of the igniter. Poor Old Yeller. Man, it's gone through a few different transformations. This is a one I brought from one of my mates. Yes, I have mates. Can you give me a 14mm socket, please? He had it sitting in the shed as a spare. And had never used it. It's got a 2003 Hilux that I wired a mega squirt onto. And it has done 120,000 Ks.
Those meat skirts they here are quite good ECU though.
I'm going to edit that bit out. It actually looks like it's had a cam belt because I can still read left cam on it, so I would say it had a cam belt put on it. Well, it runs because we know that it's got a cam belt on it, haven't we? It's been replaced. It's got 1990 leads on it. It's got stuffed rotors in it. It's got really bad rotors in it actually. Here's a good example of a broken rotor. I probably should put rotors on both sides. I need a right hand sensor. This one doesn't have it because that was running a link. That one looks good to me. Let's run with that one. So I've actually given you 3 UZ sensors. So they're longer than a 1 UZ sensor.
Yep.
So hopefully that's long enough to reach our wiring. And always make sure you line up the keyway in the rotor. Don't just put it on and bolt it up. I have seen it done. They do bolt on and it just pushes the plastic keyway and then they don't run. Funnily enough, just a little nip. This can't be a 1990 engine, eh? Because it doesn't have a cold start timer. Maybe it didn't come with leads when I got it and I just banged a set of leads on it.
Probably.
Because it should have a cold start timer if it's a really early one, so it should be this like a 92 to 94 engine.
Well, that's what I reckon.
You reckon that? It'd be a little bit hard to tell nowadays because it has actually several motors all put together. It's much easier if you take the tensioner off when you do this job.
Oh.
I'm in a hurry. If you look over here, see there's this little metal tab. Make sure you don't put the cam belt cover on the inside of that. I've seen it done. And then it gets like this knocking noise, like a duk, 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 where the trigger comes around and smacks the cover.
And you think you've always done the testing.
That's right. People bring this engine in and it's making this horrid noise. And it's because that cam belt cover isn't on properly. So this was actually an LS400 loom, not a Celsius loom.
Yep.
So a couple of little differences. I didn't get the ECU with it. But it doesn't have a hydraulic fan on an LS400. So the front crank loom has a 2-pin instead of a 4-pin. And a couple of little differences at the ECU. So here's the breather for the fuel tank, for the charcoal canister solenoid. So I've wired that in on this one. This was an LS400 and it actually had two. This one can be used for the factory charcoal canister if you want to run a factory style charcoal canister. Made a little adapter because it's LS to Celsius. I've done the back runs. We'll take the fuel line off the exhaust, eh? Good plan. Plug the TPS in.
Hose for this?
The hose for there, I just sold it.
Garden hose.
And sorry, and the other hose for there, you may have just used it on a Ford Falcon.
Versatile piece of hose that.
What about this bit? It's probably a bit big, but it'll do the job for what we're trying to do.
It'll do the bloody job, mate.
Long as all the air from the airflow meter goes through the engine, we're happy.
What's that black thing there?
That plug there is for the water temp sensor, for the gauge. So that one's for the gauge. So the early motors have a different, they've just got a spade.
That's right, as long as you haven't forgotten anything.
Oh, so that's all good. I've got the front on.
Forgetting a lot of things lately. So
I know.
check up and
We've got heat sleeving down here, so we're not going to cook things. That's the oxygen sensor's well out of the way of the exhaust. This oxygen sensor getting outside the way of the hot stuff. Mint. Okay, I'll get the relays and fuses. So to go with this loom, I've also made a new starter loom.
Why don't we just use that?
So the starter loom will clip in the factory spot, plug into the factory plug, and Mike is about to change that plug because I've just arrived because it was broken, so he's going to fix that. The knock sensor plugs have been replaced, and actually the full wiring down to the knock sensors have been replaced because it was pretty ugly, and Mike will going to give that a little bit of a shrink. And there's the main start trigger with a new plug on it. And I've actually tapped in the main start trigger here as well, because I believe this one will come from the fuse box. So this wiring is long enough to come around the vehicle. Hypothetical battery is just in front of my hoist here, about there. It'll be a little bit longer than it needs to. That can be start, or the start can come inside the cabin if need be.
The diesels run the fuse box on this side as well.
The diesel swap fuse box sides. Well, I can't turn the plenum around now because I've done it. I mean, I've left the loom not a plenum change round. Okay, so there's that loom for you to just do that extra terminal on. So I've got a brand new terminal for you there to put on. And then I've got an alternator loom. Nice and simple. Plugs on the alternator. There. Plugs in. Will come up and can be linked into the start loom. And then we've got the 3 wires for the alternator. Very simple. Yellow's for the light. White is permanent battery power or sense. And the red is the ignition. It's likely to actually be red-blue on that vehicle. Well, there's an alternator loom as well to go back with this setup. And then I've got to set this set of relays and fuses. I need an ECU. The customer didn't send me an ECU, so I will just find one. How about the Celsius one? It'll be just fine. So we're going to plug this in. And then we plug in the relays and fuses. And into the ECU. And there's this little extra one here. In there we have air conditioning wire and one of the communication wires for the scan tool. And coming off this loom, I've got some extra wires, a white one for the air conditioning and 2 more for the air conditioning triggers to the ECU. So they are AC1 and ACT. The other wire is ELS, electrical load signal or electrical load sense. So that can be connected either into the lights, preferably through a diode. So it gets a signal when the lights are on, it'll idle it up. Not strictly necessary, but I have put it in there. So that happens to be a red-white wire on this loom. So that's air conditioning wires there. I got a start wire in here as well. So that travels through the loom and comes up to the factory plug on the back with the knock sensors. Over here I've got a diagnostic port. So it's got my adapter on it. But the diagnostic port on the engine has also been modified, and we will check that is able to communicate. If you come across one of these semicircles, then it can be adjusted and wired up to go to my plug. So just like other looms I've done often, on this one I have added an Anderson plug. So also going with this loom is another one of these Anderson plugs, and I will be putting this one on before it leaves onto here. But if I fit it up, it doesn't allow me to zip tie it to my power point here, my power supply. Okay, so that lock's already on, so that one's all good. So that's the one, you don't need to do anything with that one. Okay. This one is already gone. Right. So all you have to do is pop the little pins and keep them in the right order.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
I've also supplied a spare coil plug and some spare terminals for the alternator loom. So that's going. Right, to power this up, we need an ignition source. Can I please have the fuel pump? So fuel pumps, there's 3 wires left over. Ignition switch, a fuel pump and a fan. Should I test the fan first? I'll test the fan first, eh?
Okay.
So we'll check that fan circuit. So at the front of the engine I've got this plug and there's a couple of wires listed fan.
Oops. Turns out that bucket there isn't the rubbish bin.
That's not the bucket, that's the bucket noise. So they're going to go, it doesn't matter which way around the polarity goes, it's going to go up to wherever this is mounted, the fan switch is mounted in the radiator. So I've just bridged them. One's an earth, one's a signal back to the relay. Power this up on ignition, switch goes to this wire. I didn't hear any clicking.
Probably because you haven't got the power connected.
I've got the power connected.
Oh, that's clearly not working.
I think I know the problem.
You haven't put any fuses in there.
Can you pass me the fuses? I would like. For the BATT, I want 10 will be fine. I think these really need to be like a 7. 10. 10, 10.
Another 10?
No, I want a 15. I want one more. Like a 7.5. So with the power connected and fuses fitted to the box, we should have clicking. We do, which is nice. At this point I should have power in a lot of places. Should be power here, should be power here, and power down here. We should have power at the injectors. And I suspect there should be power at the coils, which actually is up here. It's easy to get at because it's this wire here. Seeing I bridged it. We really tried quite hard not to short that out. And we should have a fan going. So that's our fan. Mike's going to disconnect the fan switch, which is the little one on the front there. That one there. Yep. And that's the fan circuit working. I'm going to connect in the fuel pump. So that will only work when the engine is cranked. There is no prime function on these Toyota ECUs. Have we got some earmuffs? Because I'll use these ones. What earmuffs are you using? Your muffs are good. Where I'm from, eh? I think that's acceptable. Not bad for a first start, eh? I heard the EFI relay reset.
Sounds much better than that mega squirt.
Does, doesn't it? Okay, I'm going to now check I've got some comms with the scan tools on both ports, and then we can take it all off and put it in a box. Is there anything else the man needs to know? So that was this engine's first start on this computer and loom. The engine was running about 30 minutes ago on a mega squirt ECU, and now it's on to the standard one. So it already had fuel pressure, but that's the first hit of the button on this wiring setup. So I'm pretty happy it runs. So now we'll do the scan tool checking. So Mike's going to plug it into the one on the engine. Now that's actually a DLC data link connector 1. It has power in it. Cool. Would you like to go forward driving? Would that make you happier?
Not really. Well, maybe a little bit.
Oh shit, I've got another wire I didn't explain actually. I thought you said we didn't need to. So on this plug here we've got the oil pressure. the tacho. So that will drive a petrol tacho, the water temp from the one on the front of the engine, and the check engine light. And we actually need a check engine light to read codes. I'm going in as a generic Toyota, and we'll give it a check engine light. So for the check engine light, I've used my test light, and I've gone to power on one side, and the earth is supplied by the ECU. It's actually got a fault code.
Probably picked that the car is missing.
You could count the flashes for me and tell me what it was. Could be a code 56 because there's no fan solenoid.
Could be many things.
No fan solenoid would be an indication because there's no fan solenoid, but it won't bring up a check light in the vehicle. So it can have a code 56 ECU, and it could have codes present for the both sub-oxygen sensors, but it won't bring a check light on, but it will just have a fault code. Okay, so being LS400, it won't have a hydraulic fan, so it won't have that fault code, but it could have the sub-oxygen sensors. Cooling fan pressure switch, which is code 56. So
I could have counted that, but you could have just looked in there and seen it.
Yeah, well, I was doing that anyway. Yeah.
So it would have been
Sub left-hand O2 sensor signal wind heater. It's not present, so not really an issue. And I don't think it's, like I've seen guys where they link the two sensors together. I've generally found if I cut that out, the vehicles are gone properly. A sub-oxygen sensor, right-hand O2 sensor and heater. None of which are present, none of which will actually bring on a check light on the dash. And we should be cycling through code 56. So we've got those three codes on this one. When it goes into the customer's vehicle, because he'll have a LS400 computer, he'll only have the two sub-oxygen sensors. I'll go out of DTC, we'll see if we get some current data. So the current data on that one is slightly different to the current data that comes out of this one. So now we'll look at live data from DLC1, which is the one on the engine. And here we have injector pulse of 32 milliseconds. We have no RPM. Engine isn't running. Few things for when you go into this one. One example of differences is the coolant temperature sensor is 2.87 volts. It doesn't actually give a temperature. So a little bit different, but at least it's still helpful. Does have that park neutral switch. So this one has a park neutral switch that says off, which is good. That means it's in gear. Perfect. That's the default setting on these. I'm happy. I've swapped to the DLC2, or the one inside the cabin. We're flashing check codes at the moment. And there is no power in this one, in this check connector, so it has to be connected externally. The scan tool is connected externally. Sub O2, right hand. Cooling switch, yep, so that's all fine. See if we get some current data. Yeah, I've got current data here. Coolant temp 29 degrees. 125 on the IAC step. 32 milliseconds of injector duration. Probably a bit much.
That's what I was thinking.
But of course it's not running, so it's probably acceptable. And park neutral switch is reverse drive 2L. So, okay. That's all good. I'm going to just... Do you want to build up a couple of sub-looms for me? I want oil pressure. I want fan. And I want air conditioning. So I'm pretty happy. It starts, it runs. It communicates with the scan tool on both ports. There's a whole lot of other little bits and pieces and plugs to go with it. There's the alternator loom and the start loom. So I think that's time to take it off and put it in a box. Send it to the customer. I think I should start it again before I do that. So let's get this wiring loom off the motor and into a box, ready to be sent away. Start loom, yes, into the box. Alternator loom.
Into the box.
You like putting things into boxes, don't you? And let's keep that. There you go. Close that off, put it in the box. I actually have all his old connectors. All the old connectors off this loom.
You're going to put them in the box?
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to ship them back to Australia. Put that in the box. But I think I might just
Stick them in the...
take a photo and send him a photo of his connectors, because I don't think it's worth freighting them back to Australia.
Tip them in the bucket of noise.
No, we're not going to tip them in a bucket of noise. I had it connected up before. I dropped the start trigger wire and my engine started. It just bounced off this, and as it passed through, touched it, motor started, and it kept going. That's how well it starts.
Amazing, eh?
Old Yella's had a good run, isn't it? So there's the relay box. There's fuses. I've labelled them on the back, we're good. So this can have a little bit of conduit or sleeve or tape or whatever on it, as per necessary. Because I didn't get some of the parts, this one must have the correct igniters. The correct igniter for this one will have CHD1 on it.
That front loom stays here.
Front loom stays here. And the airflow meter for this loom is 222-50-50060. Plastic body, all one piece like that. We'll be taking the manifold off this one anyway. So your next job, I want you to get a manifold, and I want you to take have no plenum, and I want to get your cutter out and leave the fuel rails and the ports just behind the fuel rails. I want you to cut them off. We also ran a 10 series motor on a 20 series ECU.
You do it all the time, though.
Well,
You can't do it.
can I have a little screwdriver? A couple of oxy sensors. And the 3UZ oxygen sensors work just fine on these early ones. They just got longer wires.
I know. You said that earlier.
Good. There you go. Put it in the box. We're done. Awesome. Thank you, Mike.